Welcome. Make yourself comfortable, won't you? I want to tell you a story.
Greetings, invaders. My name is Scott. This is Book Invasion. Thanks so much for joining me. If you want some sci-fi horror book reviews, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Boom. Today we're going to be talking about the very buzzed about The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. And Stephen Graham Jones is a name in horror. He's written Night of the Mannequins, Mapping the Interior. And now with this new book, The Only Good Indians, he goes to his Native American heritage to write a sinister, haunting, literary horror tale of kind of spirits and lore that goes wrong. Something goes, obviously, it's a horror book, something goes wrong. I hadn't read a lot of horror books just in general. I haven't read Stephen Graham Jones' other material, so this was kind of an impromptu jump into kind of a pretty buzzed about horror book. I got this book on audio, courtesy of Libro FM. Go check out Libro FM. Get some audiobooks, they're awesome. Support some local libraries, they do a program where they do that. Anyway, so I checked the audiobook out for this. It's something where there are a lot of pieces that into play here that are things that I hadn't expected. And I think that's kind of where horror finds its meat, is kind of in those things, those moments that you don't expect. The audio of this book was really well narrated. Now, I watched an interview where the Stephen Graham Jones interviews and talks to the author, the narrator, who also happens to be a Blackfoot Native American. When the audiobook narrator was talking to somebody in the region in which the book takes place about how to pronounce things, that person was a mutual friend of Stephen Graham Jones, the author. They kind of knew a big kind of complete circle. So it was really cool to see kind of the portrayal of that in the audiobook. It felt very genuine, and it felt very, studied and authentic. And I think that was a good piece of the book, just in general, aside from the story itself, just the way that it's presented. This is something that the author is familiar with and the narrator is familiar with, and it just lends to the credibility of the story and how it comes across. So what is this book about? This book is kind of about a spirit of an elk done wrong that just happens to kind of come back in a manifested form to seek retribution and vengeance for the wrongs that have been done upon it and its family. Cool, right? Yeah, this book, I think, breathes new life into those played out horror tropes of seeking vengeance, like The Crow or something, or Kill Bill, where somebody had been wronged, and now they're coming back to seek vengeance for those. That's kind of a theme through the story, but it's not played out in the way you would expect. Now, the book takes place in three kind of pieces, where you think you have a main character that you follow through the book, and you're chugging along, and all of a sudden that stops. Like, that character's gone now. And so you're like, oh, okay. And so part two is kind of a different character, and then part three is the final character, which kind of plays on a final girl semi-trope. And there's a theme of sports that kind of comes into play at the end. And the author, when I was watching the interview, he's like, I didn't want to write about basketball. Like, I don't like sports. I don't like watching it. I never turned this into like a sports theme as a book. But towards the end of the book, you'll see that come into play. Just get through it. I don't know if it's going to turn you off as a reader or not, but the way that's played out was really intricate, kind of meticulous, but it was really well done about the story and how the interaction between the protagonist and the antagonist kind of come together. I thought that was really amazing. So part one is kind of the shock value. Part two is a little bit of a slow burn, and then part 2 and 3 kind of collide at the end into this culmination of destruction and gruesomeness. Now, if you're lighthearted, you shouldn't be reading horror that much anyway, but if you're really queasy about animals and animals getting injured in books, then there's warning. There's that in here. I won't give away a lot, but obviously we're talking about Indians, different cultures. Things happen to animals. That's how they survive. So yes, not just elk either. Anyway, spoilers. So also in the book, it's also kind of about how, Native Americans and Indians are still, they still exist in the 20th century. And I think when I listened to the author speak about that and why he had written this book, it's more of a cultural statement that says, this is how Native Americans live now. Like, we're still there. We're not still in headbands and loincloths like in the old movies of yore. They're still struggling, and like the adolescents in the community are still battling between traditional life and growing up in 2020 and that kind of thing. And there's a discussion in part of the book where they're like, yeah, is that frowned upon? Yeah, but who's doing that? And it's a statement I think the author's making, that to bring that to the forefront, that these Native Americans and just Native American culture in general still is out there, and there's people living on reservations, and we still need to embrace all those things in today's world, and we can't let that just fall by the wayside. And this book kind of illuminates that and that culture. So I feel like this is also not just a book about horror and things like that, but it's about, Indian life, Native American life. And I thought that was really a good kind of point to make, where he could have just written this book about your normal everyday kids and people, but it's because of the author's heritage. It's, he pulled that into the story to bring that more to the forefront of the book. So in the end, I thought this book was really great. It has a lot of the superstitious lore, spirits, and kind of has a really hard-hitting front end of the book, and then a climactic ending to the book. It's a kind of a hard-hitting trio of stories between these characters, and the way that this is played out for, next time you go hunting for elk, or next time you see animals in the wild, it kind of makes you rethink that they're just there to survive as much as we are. And, Native American culture still exists. But as this was my first foray into a literary horror type of book, I really enjoyed it. I really loved it. I would recommend it, that you check it out. And if you're watching this and you have read the book and you're looking for something else similar, another book I would recommend similar to this is Coyote Songs by Gabino Iglesias. I did a review for that up on my channel as well. That's a horror story, but instead of like Native American culture, it takes kind of Hispanic and Mexican American culture and puts that into the realm of those superstitions and those spirits, and the brutality and the gore all encompasses in Coyote Songs by Gabino Iglesias. So check out that book as well. If you did read and enjoyed The Only Good Indians, I would recommend you check that one out as well. It was very awesome. And it kind of gets these other cultures kind of flowing to the forefront of your mind when you're reading these books. So anyway, those are my thoughts on The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like and subscribe. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.